You guys asked for it, so today we're going to do a build video on our diesel Mustang drag car and show you the ins and outs and how everything works. So let's get after it. So here it is. This is our diesel Mustang drag car. Doing a build video on it today. Thought I would show you the ins and outs of it. If you haven't seen the videos of this thing on the track, be sure and watch those. I have two on the channel right now. Some other shorter videos from a while back, but we just did 491 in the 8th with this car, so that's the best time for me and the best time for the car, so that's cool. Go check that out. Anyway, doing a build video on it here. I guess we can start with the motor, because that's where all the cool stuff happens, right? The engine is a 7.3 powerstroke. It's based off of that. The block is actually a Hypermax Engineering CGI block. It's not a factory block, but it is. It looks factory in every way as far as the casting goes. It's based off, everything will bolt on from a powerstroke. So that's basically the core of the engine. It has that Hypermax CGI block. The heads are actually factory Ford cylinder heads, or international, I guess you could say, but they're actually steel heads, factory castings. They've been ported and bigger valves installed and everything, but they're still the factory heads. And if you're wondering, this is the oil rail that usually is the high pressure oil for the injectors, and a lot of people ask me what these are because they go right through that oil rail. Well, these are water injectors that go in the intake runner of the head here, and they inject water into the cylinder to help cool the EGTs. We have a water pump, belt-driven water pump right here, and a valve right there that turns it on with boost pressure. But that's our water injection setup. The other major thing about this is it's mechanically injected. As if you're a diesel nerd like me, you probably already noticed the big old P-pump up here, Bosch P-pump. And Bosch P-pumps are pretty common, and you hear about them a lot in the Cummins stuff. What makes this one so special is it's an 8-cylinder P-pump. There's 8 injector lines on it, since this is 8-cylinder, obviously. And this is quite a bit different than what this engine would have came from the factory. There is a mechanically injected 7.3 that was in the earlier Fords, and a 6.9 even before that, and it has nothing similar with any of this. So it's not like I'm just running a old IDI diesel, as they call it. This is actually powerstroke based engine, and it's been converted to mechanical. And the way we do that is it's kind of all covered up, but there's this whole front cover assembly. It's all from Hypermax, and it's all built aluminum here. But the gear case up here, you got the cam gear right here, and it drives the gear that runs the cylinder pump. So that's how you set the timing and everything on this engine, is the gears in here. And we have obviously the injection lines going to injectors, and the injectors on a 7.3, they're big. They're like that big around, and the mechanical diesel injectors only like that big around. So there's a big aluminum slug in there that adapts to these, and we actually have injectors. They're like out of a Cummins 8.3, like medium duty truck engine. It has those injectors in it, obviously modified. Let's see what else. Try not to miss anything. Here's our transfer pump for our fuel. It's driven off the front of the drive gear for the injection pump. It's got a Lovejoy connector in there, and so that's our fuel pump, which comes right here. It's got a filter, and right there, and here's our fuel tank right here. Another cool thing about this is, if you can see right there, that line, right, yeah, that line right there, this one, that's our RPM sensor. There's 4 bolts in here, and I have magnets on those 4 bolts. I machine the head of the bolt to accept a magnet, and that picks up our RPM signal, because getting RPM on a mechanical diesel is kind of a tricky deal, but that's how we got that set up, to get RPM for our transmission controller. I'll show you that in a bit. But another thing with our fuel, we have a valve right here where I have a cable right here that's right here. I pull that cable, it kills the fuel to the engine, and it drops this right here, which is our air shutoff, positive air shutoff, and that will, in case of a runaway or I can't get the car shut down or anything like that, it shuts off the fuel to the pump and shuts off the air to the engine. So hopefully that gets everything shut down in a hurry if I'm going 190 mile an hour down the track and I can't get the engine to shut off. So that's a big safety deal with these mechanical engines, is a runaway situation, which is not good at all when you're drag racing. So moving on from there, I guess I could go ahead and talk about the internals. We're not going to be able to see them or anything, but I'll tell you what's in the engine as far as rotating assembly and everything goes. The pistons are D&J precision machine units. They are forged aluminum with a forged steel ring. It has a steel ring around the ring lands for the piston rings. Total steel piston rings. Connecting rods are real beef units from Hypermax, and it actually has a stock powerstroke crankshaft. It's been modified and balanced, obviously, but had some weights and stuff added, but it's still factory crankshaft. And it has a Hypermax bed plate, which is, I'll show you that when we're under the car, but it's a big chunk of steel that sandwiches the bottom of the crank instead of having main caps. It strengthens the block a ton. But moving a little bit forward here, we have, I guess I could talk about our exhaust. We have fabricated headers here that go into our turbos. We have compound turbos on this, not twin turbos, but compound turbos. A lot of the gas guys, they're kind of baffled by this setup because they're used to having twin turbos. But these are compound turbos, a little more common in diesels, and some import cars run them too. Well, what happens, we have 2 stages here. This we call atmospheric, and this is the high pressure, as I call them, or low pressure, high pressure, and you can have primary and secondary, lots of different ways to call it, but I call this one atmospheric and that one the high pressure, because this one does all the high numbers of boost. This one is a GT55 Garrett 88 millimeter. It's been a while. This is a 104 Hypermax. It's based off a Holset turbo, but it's Hypermax brand turbo. It's 104 millimeter, I think. And our first stage here makes about 50 pounds of boost, and our second stage makes anywhere 140, 145, 150. And the air comes in here first and gets pressurized, and then goes in the inlet of this turbo and gets pressurized more. And the drive pressure here is high pressure, goes here and drives this turbo, and then it drops pressure here and then drives this turbine and drive this turbo, and then goes out the exhaust there. Here's our oil pump. It is dry sump. So we have scavenge sections in the oil pan that suck oil out, and there's a scavenge section up here for the turbos, and it pumps it back here to our oil tank, which is right here. That's oil tank, oil filter. This is our crankcase vent. If we get any problems with boosting the crankcase or anything, it's blowing oil out. Hopefully it catches it all here and doesn't get anywhere it shouldn't be. Transmission cooler right here. Transmission gets pretty hot in this thing, especially sitting on the line. So yeah, I'm sure I'm missing a bunch of stuff, but that's kind of overview of the engine. I guess next we'll move on to the inside. Moving on to the interior. Here's the driver's seat. Start off with this thing here. This is what I basically control the engine with. It's on off. It's if you're around drag racing and not necessarily diesels, it would be kind of like having a mechanically injected blower, alcohol or whatever, the ones that have mechanical, and they have a valve up there on the hat. But you know, this controls the fuel. I pull back and shut it off, forward and on. And when I'm starting this thing, I'm playing with this a lot to get the fuel just right so it'll fire off. But that's how I turn the engine on and off. And we have a control panel up here that just does all your switches and stuff and runs the starter. But basically you can have the power off on this thing as long as you're cranking the engine over, it'll run. And that's another thing I guess I should point out. On drag cars, you know, you have to have a switch on the back of the car so the track staff can kill the power to the car and shut the engine off if you in event of a wreck and you're incapacitated or something like that, or there's a problem. They can kill the engine and everything right away in the back and kill all the power. Well, if you do that on this thing, the engine doesn't shut off. But back here we have one for the motor and one for power, so that kills the power, and you pull this and that kills the fuel and the air shut off, just like the lever I have inside to do that. So anyway, moving on there, we have an Altronics data logger and gauge setup. It does all the monitoring and everything for the engine. This is it's an oil pressure gauge, but it's actually hooked up to boost, so I can watch boost when I'm leaving. We usually leave it around between 40 and 60 pounds of boost on the line, or I try to anyway. It's just a RPM gauge for our Garrett turbo to keep an eye on shaft speed. See our transmission here. We have a Bruno lockup converter that's been heavily modified, and a 3-speed Lenco. The converter is a Neil Chance 12-inch diesel converter. It is a big converter from Neil Chance, and bolt together we can service the clutches and everything in them. It's a really cool converter. I guess I'll have a picture right here. Its back half's all billet and everything. It's pretty awesome. And those gauges up there are actually my drive pressure and converter pressure for my Bruno drive. We have regulators right there that I can adjust that, and basically I can adjust the differential between the drive pressure and the converter pressure on there and help get lockup better and help drive the car, and you can adjust all that and everything. That's our lockup solenoid up there too that runs the lockup in the converter. 3-speed Lenco, pretty basic deal here. Real simple, easy to work on, and real tough. We put several sets of clutches in this, but not very many. We had some shifting issues that were burning up clutches earlier on, but we got some new solenoids over there that I'll show you when I'm on that side, but that shifts the transmission, and that helped a lot with the durability of the clutches. It's real instant shift, just right away, and these things don't like to drag any, and our old setup was dragging a little bit, or slow to apply. So there's a, you can't see it, but there's a overdrive unit on here, which is real rare, and I don't really know where it came from. We got this transmission used from another diesel guy, and I've talked to the Lenco guys there and explaining our setup, and I was talking about the overdrive unit, and he didn't even know what I was talking about. But it's there. It says Lenco on it, so I don't know where it came from. It might, you know, just been an experimental deal or something. I don't know, but it's got overdrive. Our final gear ratio on this is 0.63 to 1, I think. I might have to look, but anyway, all the gears are overdriven, so it's just a full-time overdrive. So your first gear and second gear is actually a little bit lower than you normally would, but then it's overdriven back here. Probably eats up a little power, but it works for us in the quarter mile anyway. We don't really need it in the eighth, but in the quarter mile we're limited to about I shift at about 5,800 on this thing. So we have a lot less RPM than a lot of people have with their gas cars. Up there we have parachutes. Do dual parachutes. Eighth mile I only pull one. Quarter mile I pull two. Fire extinguisher up there we have a nozzle right here, and we have a nozzle up in the engine compartment. We have radio, in-cab radio. So go over here. Right here's the shift solenoids I was talking about. Those control the these lines. I have the covers off of this, by the way. There are covers that go on this, but these lines go to these shift pods and do air pressure that, and there's a fork that jams down and applies the clutch. But those are our shift solenoids. And there's a bump box there we got for our trans brake. This is water injection tank. That's for the water we inject in the engine. And here is our controller for the transmission and lockup and all that. It goes right here so I can access it while I'm driving. But this is our delay box. We use the delay box for several things. We use it for the lockup, and I also use it for nitrous. So we have 3 different timers there, and I can control when lockup hits and when the stages of nitrous hit. This is our shift controller. It goes off of RPM and does the commands the solenoids to shift the transmission. And speaking of shifting the transmission, it's ran with this bottle here. We actually fill this thing with nitrous, but it's not liquid when it comes out because there's no dip tube in that, so it's all gas. We fill it with nitrous because it lasts a little bit longer than CO2, and we have nitrous here, so it's easy to fill the bottles here. We have a regulator, about 200 psi, goes and shifts the transmission and also runs the trans brake. This is our fire extinguisher for our onboard fire system. Nitrous bottle for the engine nitrous. And we have, I guess I didn't talk about that when we're in the engine compartment. Here's our nitrous setup. We have 2 power stages and 2 spool stages. On the spool jets, I have one. As soon as I hit the trans brake, it gives a little shot of nitrous, and then as soon as the computer sees 4 psi, it gives it another hit. If I give it all early on, it doesn't like it, so I have to have a little bit of boost going. It'll just kill the engine, backfire and kill the engine. So as soon as it hits a little bit 4 psi, then it gives the other one, and then it really takes off. So that first set, when I'm spooling, the first couple psi is really hard to get to, but when I get past that, then it really takes off. So that is a bad thing about a mechanical engine. The down low performance is kind of hard to finesse, because it's basically, when you got that big of a pump, it's kind of like an on-off switch. You either have all the fuel or you don't. So when you're trying to finesse it and get just a few psi and get it going without snuffing the charges out, you got to be real easy and gentle with it. And another thing is, it's fixed timing, so it has 46 degrees of timing in it all the time. We can't change the timing when we're low RPM without boost, and all that stuff. So it's ideal for peak power, and that's it. So that's the interior. I guess I could talk. The chassis is a 6.0 Cert chrome moly chassis. So we have a 6.0 Cert on that, and it was actually built in '98, so it was a little bit older. But we put double frame rails in it when we put the diesel in it and some other strengthening stuff. So that's that. Back here we have our dual parachute. One of them still deployed from last time we were at the track, but spring-loaded parachutes and wing back here, typical stuff. Dual batteries in the back to start that diesel. Water overflows in the back too. Never really have any problem with that, but that's back there in case there's any head gasket issues or anything like that. It blows water in the back, not in front of the tires. Little cool thing right here. Here's the button that does our data logger, so I don't even have to deal with it in the cab. The crew on the outside hits a button here and starts the data logger on the line. So yeah, so let's raise this thing up and check out underneath it. Okay, here we are under the car. I'll start up here at the front. Here's a tank we have, catch tank for our turbos, the oil drain. So it comes into this tank, and then we have a scavenge section here. We had we've had some problems early on with oil getting pushed past the seals because these turbos are so low in the chassis. It's hard to get. Here I can see, get it. So here's the bottom of the turbo, and you can't even see the oil pan. So getting that oil to drain to the pan is real tough. So we did have an electric scavenge pump early on, and it could not keep up with both turbos and this really big journal bearing turbo here. So we had to add another scavenge section to our oil pump here, and we ran a box here and scavenged off of that for the turbos. So here's the oil pan. We used to have a steel pan on it that came from Hypermax, and I ballooned that thing out. We had some problems with pistons. Here's this guy. See, that it's not supposed to be round. Ballooned it out. And right here is why it ballooned out. Melting pistons. We had lots of problems with pistons early on. We found an issue with some injector nozzles and stuff, but so far so good. And we burned quite a few pistons. But so far so good with these D&J precision pistons. We hadn't had any problems. Anyway, aluminum pan, I made that one. And normally there is a belly pan under here, and we also have a pan that goes under the transmission all the way almost to the rear end, so any drips and stuff will be caught on that. Here's the bell housing for the torque converter, and pan for the Bruno, and then the Lenco right here. And we have a strange ultra case third member here. We have 380 gears, I think. I'd probably have to look to be sure. Dual brakes in the rear, strange dual calipers for extra holding power on the line. Weld racing beadlocks. So yeah, here's on this exhaust here. This normally goes out. We have a bullhorn out here for the exhaust, but it doesn't fit in our trailer, so it's in the trailer. We take that off every time. So that's underneath it. So that's it, guys. A quick rundown of our Mustang. Hopefully it answers all the questions you had. If I didn't, if you have some questions, hit in the comments below, and I'll try to answer any questions you guys have and keep up with all those. So feel free to ask anything you want, and I'm hoping I get that oil leak that I talked about in my last video fixed. That's why it's on the lift. And I want to go to the track before it shuts down. We're in November here in Oklahoma. Usually that's about the end of the racing season, so it starts to get cold. So we might have a couple more weeks of racing left or testing. So hopefully I get to the track 1 or 2 more times, and I'll be sure to take you guys along. So thanks for watching, everyone. Hit that subscribe button if you like the Mustang or any of my other projects. You know, it really helps the channel out. And thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.